Hey guys, welcome back to my channel Rewind That. It's your girl Miss K. If this is your first time coming across my channel, welcome. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you know when I upload more videos like this one. Thank you so much for joining me once again. Now, today we're going to be going over the latest episode of Lovecraft Country, episode number 8, called Jigga Bobo. Now, this episode, guys, was extremely good to me. It was very entertaining, but it was also very sad. All right. So it starts off with us seeing a large crowd of people. They're standing outside of a church or a funeral home, right? We find out that it's Emmett Till's funeral. And, people are coming out of the church, throwing up. And even Diana says, "What's that smell?" And she realizes that it's Emmett's body. Oh man, so we find out that Emmett Till was Diana's best friend, whom they called Bobo. Now let's rewind back to episode number 3 called Holy Ghost, where Diana and her friends were playing on a Ouija board at Leti's housewarming, right? So one of the boys there let it be known that he was going to Mississippi for the summer, and he asked the Ouija board if he would enjoy his trip, and the Ouija board answered no. Now, the weird thing about this moment for me was that I thought of Emmett Till, right? Because I remembered that he was from Chicago and visited his family in Mississippi. But it never crossed my mind that this kid was in fact playing Emmett Till, okay? So anyway, this whole reminder of Emmett Till's horrible murder was just so sad, and it was easy to get a sense of heaviness, But let's move on to Diana running off, okay? She's causing Ruby, Tic, and Leti to go looking for her, and Montrose as well. So while the group splits up to find her, Ruby is confronted by 2 cops. And she does the dumbest thing, by the way, okay? By continuing her steps into the alleyway, rather than staying on the main street where the encounter stays out in the open. Anyway, we know what happens, right? The officer asking all the questions is also involved in magic. And I do believe he's a member of the Order of Ancient Dawn, as we have seen him having a conversation with Christina. Anyway, he's asking Diana all these questions about who her mother is and if she knows anything about magic. Eventually, he casts a spell on her using some spell language and his disgusting spit. Now, honestly, I gagged at this part and I had to kind of turn away a little bit or squint my eyes because that spit stuff was so freaking gross. Anyway, next Leti goes to her house looking for Diana, only to find that Jiha was sitting in her living room, okay? And I was like, oh snap. After seeing a whole episode about Jiha, I knew we hadn't seen the last of her anyway. So meanwhile, Tic goes to meet up with Christina at a mausoleum because he wants her to teach him how to cast a spell. So she wants to know, why now? You had my card all this time. Why are you calling me now? And so he simply says, well, because it's my birthright. And her answer was that's not enough. Okay. You don't have enough whiteness in you to sell that entitlement. And she lets him know that something has changed. You are desperate for something. You need protection. Anyway, Tic tells her that he can give her the key that was found in the Ori if she helps him with a spell. Then she lets him know that an incantation isn't a spell and that the words aren't enough. To cast, you need energy, intention, and a body. And that's how you upset the balance of nature without a disaster. Then she draws a symbol on one of the mausoleums. She tells Tic to trace this symbol around the location he's going to cast a spell in, either with chalk or blood. Then Tic gives her the key. But before she leaves, he asks her what's going to happen during the autumnal equinox. She tells him that she's going to be the one to achieve immortality. So she's not much different from her father. For this reason, I wouldn't trust Christina. Anyway, next, Dee goes back home and Montrose asks her where she's been because, everybody's out looking for her. So she starts yelling at him and being all disrespectful and telling him that she don't have to tell him nothing because he's not her father. So she goes to the bathroom and shuts the door. And she's trying to clean her face and everything while Montrose is outside screaming, "Dee, open this door." Anyway, Montrose finally calms down and he's talking to her, trying to let her know that he understands. Same thing happened to him. He lost his best friend, blah, blah, blah. But, Dee over there, she's still being rude. She's turning on the radio and turning it up and this and that. She ain't trying to hear nothing he got to say. And then all of a sudden she sees this book and the faces start to change on this book. So she's getting creeped out and she leaves out through the window. And in the meantime, Mantra was like, okay, D, I'm coming in. He walks in, which the door was unlocked the whole time, but he walks in and she's gone. All right. So anyway, we're going to skip over the weird sex scene with William, aka Christina, and Ruby, who transforms into the white lady that she was always transforming into. And I don't remember her name. So we're going to just skip over that and move on to Tic coming home to see Jiha sitting at the table with Leti. So Jiha explains to them that she's a kumiho and that she saw Tic die. We could also see that this conversation made Leti super uncomfortable. Anyway, Tic asks Jiha when he's supposed to die, and she says, I don't know. So he was like, if you don't have any answers, why are you here? That's when Leti speaks up and says, because she loves you. Then she gets up and goes to her room. Tic then says to Jiha, what we had wasn't real. Now get out. And that's the nice version I'm giving you guys, okay? Because Tic was harsh, and so were his words. And I felt bad for how he treated her. You know, I understand that he's in love with Leti, which I'm so here for, but he didn't have to be so mean to Gia. Anyway, Tic goes after Leti and he tells her that he's sorry for not telling her about what happened with Gia in Korea. So Leti tells him that she understands why he didn't tell anyone at first, you know, when he first came back. But after everything that they've gone through and seen together, he should have been able to tell her about it after that. And I totally agree with Leti with that one. Like, they done seen magic, she been resurrected, they done seen monsters. It's just so many things that, you know, Tic could have definitely told her and it would have been believable. So he had no excuse for that. But anyway, we know that Leti's pissed off, right? And she tells Tic to leave and that ever since he came back, everyone has died except him. So Tic storms off and she's like, where are you going? And he tells her that he's going to make it right by casting a spell. And Leti says, no, what if Jiha's right and that's how you die? You know, because Jiha doesn't know how Tic is going to die. But Leti is saying, what if Jiha's right about you dying and that the spell is the way that you die? You know, by trying to cast a spell. Anyway, so Leti tells him, you know, you can't make these decisions by yourself anymore because there's so much at stake. So Tic says, don't you think I know that? But we're surrounded by monsters and I don't have a choice. I'm doing this for our future. So as they're talking, I'm thinking to myself, did she tell him that she's pregnant? You know, does she know she's pregnant? And did she tell him? Because the way they were talking, it was as if they knew that she was pregnant, you know. But then we find out that Leti knows she's pregnant, but she hasn't told Tic. But he knows anyway. So during a conversation with Montrose, we find this out, right? We find out that Tic was also sucked into the portal last week. A lot of people were wondering this, you know, they wanted to know, was Tic sucked into the portal? But since we didn't see his journey like how we saw with Hippolyta, it left a lot of people confused, right? Including me. But I did notice that he was holding a book in his hand called Lovecraft Country, and that confused me even more, so I kind of just left it alone. So through this conversation with Montrose, we find out that when Tic went through the portal, he was taken to the future. He was able to see that he was going to have a son named George who would become the author of the book Lovecraft Country. So Tic has already read this book in its entirety, and the book is loosely based on their family history with a few changes, but similar enough to know that it's based on true events. So Montrose says to Tic, please tell me there's a happy ending. That's when Tic tells Montrose that Christina sacrifices him to become immortal on the autumnal equinox. Then Montrose realizes that this will take place in 5 days. So, you know, Montrose is not comfortable with this at all, and he looks worried. But Tic is determined to do whatever he can to protect his son's destiny. And he tells Montrose that he knows that casting a spell could kill him, but he has to do whatever he can to live for his son. And when he says these words to Montrose, you can see that Montrose felt the need to step up to the plate because that's what fathers should do, right? So Montrose says that he's willing to be the sacrifice. He tells Tic that since part of casting a spell is intention, then he intends to save his son's life and his grandson's life, even if it takes his own. Next, Diana goes to the officer who cast a spell on her, and she wants to know what he did to her and what will happen if those two thingamajiggies get her, right? I don't know what those things were, but they were following her and dancing and all that stuff. And by the way, them things could dance too. So The cop tells her that he can remove the spell if she gets him the orrery. So Diana pretty much says, screw you. And no, that is not what she really said, but I'm keeping it clean. So she spits on him, then she leaves. And the other cop that was there was trying to go after her, but the first officer, which I don't know his name, I keep calling him the officer that knows magic, he says, don't worry about the girl, she's dead already. Next, Montrose and Tic work on casting the spell. And while Montrose is reading, he switches up a few words. And, when he did that, he let Tic know that what he was reading didn't make any sense. So Tic looked at it and is like, oh, you switched the words. And Montrose was like, oh, yeah, that happens sometimes. And Tic said, what do you mean sometimes? And so Montrose was like, I'm dyslexic, boy. And Tic was like, since when? So Montrose says, since I was a little boy. And then Tic was like, anything else you hiding from me? And that's when I was like, yep, he's hiding the fact that he might not be your real daddy, okay? But Montrose had that look on his face like, oh my gosh, let's get away from this right away. So he changed the subject real quick, like, can we get on with this before I change my mind and my nerves get the best of me? So anyway, they work on casting the spell, but once it's over, Tic tells Montrose that he doesn't feel anything, so he thinks the spell didn't work. Next, Christina hires 2 men to beat her up, shoot her, then tie barbed wire around her neck, which is attached to an iron fan that helps to pull her into the water. So I guess she was trying to put herself in Emmett Till's situation because that's sort of what happened to him. But I'm going to say right now that if you guys know the full details of the Emmett Till story, you already know dang well that what they did to Christina ain't even half of what they did to Emmett Till, okay? It's so horrible that I don't even want to repeat it, okay? I've watched documentaries and everything, and it's not anything I ever want to see again, but I know the horrific things that went on with this situation from the family members' accounts and especially from the mother's account, from her own mouth. I'm watching her tell the story, and it was horrible, okay? Not even the half. So, oh my gosh. Anyway, that was just a part of this episode that was like, oh gosh, it was just really sad and just brought you back to knowing about that story. But this episode was still very good as a whole. Anyway, like I said, I guess Christina did all this because earlier in the episode, Ruby pressed her about not caring about what happened to Emmett, right? Christina admitted that she didn't care, but she also accused Ruby of not really caring either. She said something to Ruby about still being a woman who wanted what she wanted, even on a day like today, which is the day that they had the whole funeral for Emmett Till. So anyway, back to Christina's little experiment. She was able to resurrect herself because she casted a spell before those guys started beating on her. Anyway, when she climbs onto the dock, she starts crying hysterically. So I don't know if that meant she had sympathy to what happened to Emmett or what. Anyway, next, Leti is home and she's talking to Ruby and she lets her know that she's pregnant. So Ruby kind of gets on her and tells Leti that she should have stayed at their brother Marvin's house instead of following Tic to Artem. That's when Ruby also reveals that she knows all about magic and about what happened to Uncle George, right? That's also when Leti finds out that Ruby has been spending time with Christina. So Leti tells Ruby that she needs to be careful with Christina and that she can't be trusted. But Ruby says, I know what I'm doing. I'm getting what I want. And that's magic, okay? And Christina is going to teach me. Anyway, before they could finish, one of Leti's tenants tells her that she needs to get upstairs now. So when they get upstairs, this police officer is at the door, Mr. Magic Cop. And there's a bunch of cops outside as well. So the same cop that wants the orrery tells Ruby and Leti that they got some type of tip about them wanting to incite a riot or something like that, right? To avenge Emmett. But of course, we know that it was a lie just to search the premises for that orrery. But anyway, when the officer that knows magic tries to enter the home, he couldn't. And I was so excited about that because I forgot all about that barrier that is around Leti's house. Her house is protected by magic. Anyway, because of this, Leti knows that this cop knows magic, right? Anyway, so the cop says, let's get out of here. But just when we think Leti and her people are in the clear, bullets come flying through the windows and all over the house, right? All through the house. So they're shooting up the house and everyone's ducking, including Leti. But Leti realizes that she's invulnerable now. So she sits up, and the bullets that come near her bounce off her personal barrier of protection. So earlier we saw that Christina met up with Leti at a church where Leti was praying for God to protect Atticus. When Christina arrives, Leti asks her if she could make Tic invulnerable, and Christina says no, right away without hesitation, by the way, right? Because she doesn't want to make Tic invulnerable because she wants to sacrifice him eventually for her own gain, right? Instead, she offers to make Leti invulnerable. Leti refuses at first, but then changes her mind as Christina is walking away. Anyway, Christina makes Leti invulnerable in exchange for the lost pages. She gave her some type of proofs, right? That negative proofs of the lost pages. So this is why Leti is now able to sit up while the bullets are flying in at her, through her house. But then Tic shows up and he sees the cops shooting at the house. And Leti also looks out the window and she sees the cops pointing the guns at Tic now because here they see a black man on the north side. So they like, oh, put your hands up, boy, hands up, right? All of the cops are now pointing their guns at Tic. And Leti is like frantic. So she runs outside. But one of the cops fire his gun at Tic and the bullet is on its way straight to him. But all of a sudden, a shoggoth comes out of the ground protecting Tic. All right. And it starts ripping off heads and tearing them officers up. OK, cars were flying and officers were flying, too. So Tic runs to Leti and they're watching all this stuff going on. And after the shoggoth finishes killing all the officers, it approaches them and starts roaring right in Tic's face, in their faces, basically. But when Tic extends his hand and lays it on the shoggoth's head, it calms down. Then Leti says, the spell worked. And that's how the episode ended, guys. So I really thought this episode was so good. And like I told you guys already before, and I cannot wait till next week. But one thing I didn't mention was that Hippolyta has not returned, and who knows if she will. Also, Dee was finally attacked by those dancing monsters that no one can see but her. Now, the weird thing was that they stopped attacking her when Montrose wrapped his arm around her. If you guys remembered, or if you go back and watch it, you might notice that they were scratching her arm up, but eventually stopped. I don't know if that means that Montrose has some sort of protection around him as well, since he did the spell with Tic, but we'll see, right? Anyway, those two creepy monster girls was so weird to watch, okay? They were dancing around and I don't know, their bodies were like flexible and stuff. They just looked crazy. And the music that they were dancing to was so weird as well. It was super creepy. One thing I want to point out before I go is that before this spell was casted on to Dee, there were two girls, right, that they came out of like an ice cream shop or something like that. And they were acting like they were in heaven, like times were great. Like the whole city wasn't mourning the horrific murder of this sweet boy, Emmett Till. And they were just eating ice cream and laughing and giggling. And then they turned around and they saw Dee and they waved like, stuff is sweet around here. So Dee picked up some rocks and started throwing it at them and they ran. And she was like, ain't nothing to laugh about. You know what I'm saying? So what I noticed about those girls is that one was light skinned and one was darker skinned, right? And so were those, monster chicks that was chasing Dee. One was lighter skin and one was darker. Now, I don't know if there's a connection, but that is the connection that I've made. That's something that I noticed. Anyway, folks, that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what y'all thought about this episode. Also, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And hit that notification bell so you know when I upload more videos like this one. All right, take care and be blessed. Bye-bye.